For the past several years, I've been living an ordinary life in the city. It's the place I spent nearly all my time, day in and day out. I had a condo just a couple miles from where I worked, which made everything super convenient, so I never really had a reason to leave the area. This week, though, I ran into a few problems with my condo that were starting to really get on my nerves, and hiring someone to fix them would have cost me way too much. The problem was that I didn't own any tools myself. To save as much money as possible, I went on Craigslist to check if anyone was selling used tool sets. It was about time I finally got one. To my surprise, there were tons of listings. Some of them weren't great deals, but I just needed the basics. I kept scrolling until I found a decent option, a gently used toolkit with everything I'd need at a fair price. I shot the seller an email, and within about 10 minutes, we agreed to meet. He told me I could swing by his place the next day whenever I had time to pick it up. I usually work until 8, but since I tend to stay up late anyway, that worked fine for me. His place was pretty far though, at least for me. It was about 50 minutes outside the city in this really small town I'd never even heard of. On the satellite map, it looked like only 100 houses or so, all clustered in one spot. The following day after work, I made the drive out of the city. The roads were mostly empty and honestly kind of peaceful once I left the crowded buildings behind. It was already dark by the time I started getting close. The area was mostly wooded, with just a few gas stations and shops scattered around. The neighborhood I pulled into, though, felt seriously sketchy. The houses were mixed in with the trees, and they were obviously very old. They looked like they'd been standing for over a century with barely any upkeep. Some of them were definitely abandoned. That made me feel uneasy as I kept driving down the wooded road until I reached the address the guy had given me. His house looked just like the others, small, old, and barely holding itself up. Even though the neighborhood gave me a bad feeling, I reminded myself that I was from the city and probably just wasn't used to places like this. I figured maybe it wasn't really as bad as I thought. I parked at the end of the driveway and stepped out. Right away, I noticed how quiet everything was. It was so silent it almost felt unnatural. No people outside, no noise coming from the homes, not even passing cars. Just complete dead silence. I walked up to the door and knocked. While I waited on the porch, I kept getting this weird feeling that made me want to look behind me over and over. After about a minute, the door finally opened. The guy who answered was average height with messy brown hair and a scruffy beard. He definitely didn't look like he had things together. He invited me inside and led me to the living room, where a heavy tool bag filled with everything he was selling sat on the couch. One detail that made the whole thing feel even creepier was that the house barely had any lights on. There was just a single lamp in the living room that barely gave off more than shadows. As we walked in, I also noticed that the back door near the hallway was broken, hanging completely off its hinges and leading outside. I didn't really know what to check for in the toolkit, but honestly, I just wanted to pay and get out of there. I pretended to look it over, then pulled out my cash and turned around to hand it to him, only to realize he wasn't there. The room was completely empty. Where the hell did he go? I called out his name, but the house stayed eerily quiet. All I could hear were faint creaks from the walls and floors, but I couldn't tell if it was just the old place settling or not. My adrenaline started kicking in hard. Something deep down in my gut told me this was really bad. I called out one more time as I slowly moved toward the front door, leaving the tools behind. But when I got into the hallway, someone was standing there. It wasn't the same guy. I couldn't see him clearly because he was standing in the shadows. but I could tell he was taller and much broader than the first guy. I tried to sound calm and said, "I was just heading to my car to grab some money if that's okay," hoping he'd move aside and let me leave. He stayed silent. The way he stood made it obvious he was blocking the hall on purpose. I froze there, trying to figure out what to do, when suddenly I heard a loud creak to my right. I turned my head toward it. The room beside me was completely dark. If I had to guess, I'd say it was the kitchen, but it was so black inside that I couldn't see anything. Right then, pure survival instinct took over, and I bolted straight for the broken back door I remembered. As I sprinted outside, I heard heavy creaks behind me that definitely sounded like footsteps chasing me. Thankfully, there was no fence, so I managed to run around the house and back toward the front. Just as I was about to reach my car, someone jumped out from behind it and then ran off into the dark. I had no idea what they were doing, but I knew I had to get out fast. I unlocked the door, jumped in, and floored it out of there. My adrenaline was still surging long after I left. I'm almost certain there were multiple people inside that house, and one of them had been trying to mess with my car so I couldn't escape. I can't say for sure what their plan was, but I know one thing. If I hadn't run when I did, I don't think I would have made it out alive. This didn't happen very long ago. Honestly, I didn't even know about the awful things that happened to others on Craigslist until after this incident. I always figured it was fairly safe as long as you stayed careful. Apparently, I didn't really follow that logic myself. This was during the very first month after I had moved into my new house. It had been a cross-country move into an area I was still unfamiliar with. I ended up selling nearly everything before relocating. So for the first couple of weeks, I would scroll through Craigslist whenever I had some free time, searching for anything I might need, mainly furniture or little things to fill the empty house. Prior to this, I had already gotten a few items off Craigslist without any issues at all. Because of that, I didn't see much reason to feel uneasy. One evening after work, I came across a listing for a really nice couch. It was almost exactly what I had been looking for. A blue sectional in what appeared to be great condition, and the price was solid, only $150. The seller got back to me quickly. His name was Peter, and from his messages, he seemed like a laid-back guy. We settled on the price and started arranging how to meet up. The only problem was that I only had an SUV. At best, it could fit one section at a time, and since he lived in the town next to mine, I would have needed several trips to haul the entire sofa back. When I explained that I couldn't transport it all at once, he offered to bring it over in his pickup truck. Naturally, I would have preferred to see the couch before paying for it, and I wasn't exactly comfortable giving some random guy my home address. But it seemed way more practical this way. He didn't come across pushy or sketchy at all. He genuinely seemed like he was just trying to help make it easier. After considering it for a while, I agreed. We set up for him to come by my house at 5:20 the next evening. I went to bed early, then sent him my address the next morning, and spent most of the day cleaning the other rooms of the house. As it got close to 5:20, I stayed in the living room watching TV, keeping the blinds partly open. Right around 5:20, I noticed headlights down the road. A few seconds later, a black pickup truck drove by slowly, but when I looked, there wasn't a couch in the back of the truck, so I just assumed it belonged to someone else in the neighborhood and kept waiting. Still, just a few minutes later, The exact same truck went past my place again. This time it was weird the way it slowed down, like the driver was checking out my house or maybe even looking through the windows as they rolled by. It gave me a pretty uneasy feeling, but I brushed it off. I shot Peter a text asking if he was still on the way, then turned my attention back to the TV. After sending that message, I didn't see the truck pass by anymore. What was even stranger, though, was that Peter never replied to me. He never showed up or gave me any kind of update. By 6:20, a whole hour past the agreed time, I sent another text, but it wouldn't go through, which meant he had blocked my number. I had no idea what went wrong, but honestly, I wasn't all that worried, just more annoyed that he wasted my evening. Maybe he found another buyer willing to pay more, or maybe something else happened and just didn't want to admit it, so he ghosted me instead. Stuff like that happens sometimes. By the time it got later in the night, I was pretty much over it. I had dinner, organized my office, then went to bed and spent the rest of the night watching YouTube. I don't even recall exactly when I fell asleep. I think I just passed out during a video, but I know I had been out for at least a couple of hours. I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night because of a very unsettling noise. It was the long creak of wood, which I immediately recognized as the sound of my front door slowly opening. I knew it without a doubt since it was the only squeaky door in the entire house and always bothered me. But who on earth had just opened it? I sat up and stared at my bedroom door, listening carefully. I could hear faint footsteps moving inside below me. The only reason I could hear them at all was because of the empty echo of the house. Panic started to set in, but I stayed frozen in place, unable to move. The footsteps eventually stopped at the bottom of the stairs. A long silence followed before a man's voice called out. But it wasn't just anything. He was calling my name. His voice was deep, older sounding, but it wasn't anyone I recognized. He called my name again. What disturbed me most was that there was no tone or emotion to his voice. He just kept repeating my name flatly from the bottom of the staircase, like he knew I was upstairs. I quietly grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I was terrified he might hear me whispering to the dispatcher, but I didn't feel like I had any other choice. The man stayed at the stairs, still repeating my name. Once I knew police were on their way, I moved from my bed to the closet. I wasn't sure if he was planning to come upstairs, but clearly something was wrong with him, and I wasn't about to risk it. Only about 20 seconds after I got into the closet, the man stopped speaking. From there, I couldn't hear anything else. Not footsteps, not doors, nothing. That made me even more anxious, unsure if he was still inside or even right outside my bedroom door. Luckily, within minutes, the officers arrived. The place was empty. Whoever had broken in was already gone. I immediately explained the Craigslist situation because I was almost certain it was Peter. I had literally just given him my address that morning and noticed the truck suspiciously circling my house earlier. Since I still had his number, I thought they would be able to track him. But then we hit a problem. My messages hadn't failed because he blocked me. They failed because the number itself no longer existed. It was a burner phone, no way to trace it back, and even if they somehow discovered who he was, there wasn't any real evidence to prove he was the one who broke into my house. Still, I'm nearly positive it was that guy. Sometimes I wonder if maybe his real plan was to lure me to his place, where he had something set up, but then decided he could still go through with whatever he had planned by showing up at mine. Maybe he thought he could handle it, but things didn't go how he expected. I honestly don't know. It's also really unsettling that he never actually came upstairs, just stood at the bottom repeating my name like that. The police said it looked like he had picked the lock on the front door, so I had it replaced right away and installed a security camera. Moving out wasn't an option, so now I'm just trying to take every precaution possible. Thankfully, nothing else has happened since. Every so often, I end up browsing websites like Craigslist, eBay, or others like them, just to see if there's anything random I might need or simply want. It felt kind of like thrifting online, something entertaining to pass the time, and once in a while, I scored some amazing deals on things I never would have bought otherwise. This all happened back in 2017, so quite a while ago now. I had come across a few items on Craigslist that caught my interest. The ad showed a bin stuffed with home decorations like candles, picture frames, and just little cute pieces to brighten up a space. My apartment was pretty plain and empty, so I figured grabbing some random decor might help make it feel more alive. I reached out to the seller, a woman named Jade, and she came across as really nice. Basically, she explained that she was in the process of moving and wanted to sell off the things she didn't care for or thought might break during the move. Her only goal was to get rid of it all, so she was willing to let it go for super cheap. She told me that for $25, I could take whatever I wanted or even the whole pile if I decided to grab everything. We arranged to meet in a nearby parking lot after she finished work at 5 on a Tuesday evening. I was done with work at 4 o'clock that day, so I just headed straight there from the office. The spot we chose was the parking lot of a grocery store, which was usually busy at that time of night. People were constantly coming and going. I texted Jade to let her know what car I was driving and where I was parked, then waited. It was the middle of winter, so I had the heat blasting in my car, hoping she'd arrive quickly. But just a few minutes later, I got a text saying she was running late and asked if I could meet her somewhere closer to her instead. Obviously, that was frustrating, but she seemed very apologetic. And since it might save time for both of us, I figured it wasn't too big of a deal to drive a little farther. Jade sent me the address of another parking lot nearer to her, so I plugged it into my GPS and started driving. I hadn't spent much time on that side of town, so I wasn't entirely sure where it was leading me. The drive took about 15 minutes. Even though it was only around 6 o'clock when I arrived, the sun had already gone down since it was winter, and it was pretty dark outside. What made it even darker was that none of the buildings around the parking lot had their lights on. It turned out to be a small lot for a strip mall, but it was completely deserted, and the only car there was parked at the far edge of the spaces. The whole scene felt off as I pulled in. Jade had mentioned she drove a blue Toyota SUV, and sure enough, the lone car in the corner was exactly that. I drove over and parked a couple of spots away. The difference between meeting in a crowded grocery store lot earlier to now being in this empty, dark lot was unsettling. I told myself I'd just see how things went since I was already there, and if anything felt wrong, I'd leave. I got out of my car and stood nearby, waiting for Jade to step out as well. That's when I realized I couldn't see inside her windows. Maybe they were tinted, but with how dark it was nearly impossible to see through. While I stood out in the cold, I started feeling more and more uneasy. I was outside for maybe 14 seconds before I decided I'd just get back in my car and leave when her door finally opened. But it wasn't Jade who stepped out. A man got out instead. He looked to be in his 40s with dark hair and a thick winter jacket. He quickly explained that Jade couldn't make it because she was stuck at work, and he had come to hand me the stuff from Craigslist. I thought the whole situation was very strange and felt like I should have gotten a text about it beforehand. It seemed like he had purposely left out that information until I was already there. While I hesitated, he added that because of all the hassle, he'd let me have everything for free if I wanted. He smiled as he popped open the trunk and motioned for me to come check it out. I wasn't sure how to get out of the situation politely, but I absolutely knew I wasn't going to walk over there. Maybe if this had been in a crowded public place, I wouldn't have been so cautious. But here, completely alone, I was seriously on edge. I started heading back toward my car quickly. I said I was just going to call Jade to confirm. His smile immediately disappeared as I turned back and climbed inside. I pulled up her number in my messages and called. A few seconds later, I heard the muffled sound of a phone ringing outside. My stomach dropped instantly. I looked over and saw him slowly pull a phone out of his pocket before hanging up. In a rush of panic, I turned on my car as he started walking fast toward my door. I sped off immediately. At that point, I was almost positive this had all been a setup, and Jade never actually existed. I figured the man had been behind it from the start, pretending to be a woman to trick girls like me into showing up alone. I shudder to think about what could have happened if I had gone over to that open trunk. Later that night, I called my sister and told her what happened, and she urged me to contact the police. So I did. Unfortunately, since nothing physically happened, and there's no actual crime in pretending to be someone named Jade online, they couldn't take action even though it was extremely suspicious. To me, it was obvious that this was a setup with intentions that were likely horrifying. I just hope no one else ever fell for it.